Opinions voiced in this program are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, and financial advisor or tax advisor prior to investing. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, SIPC.
Good morning, and welcome to Beyond the Business, brought to you by the College of Charleston School of Business. The College of Charleston School of Business, where students are beyond ready to work, they're ready to make an impact. Each Saturday morning at 9, successful business leaders and entrepreneurs from across the Lowcountry talk about what it takes to succeed in business and in life. Now your hosts of Beyond the Business, Eric Cox and Leslie Haywood.
And great Saturday morning, Lowcountry. Welcome to another edition of Beyond the Business, heard here on 94.3 WSC and simulcast on iHeartRadio, or you may be checking us out via our podcast on iTunes or Spotify. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Cox, here with Leslie Haywood for another great edition this Saturday morning of Beyond the Business, presented by the College of Charleston School of Business. We're so excited to have you here, Leslie. Good morning, halfway through December.
I know. I can't believe it. We're getting so close to Christmas. My kids, they're both, they're 16 and 18, but oh my gosh, Christmas is still such a magical time of the year. I can't wait. So,
we've been doing this show for a long time together, and I don't know if you remember this, but I don't remember a lot. I remember this. You shop early, so I know your shopping's already done, right?
Yes. Yep.
Do you remember when I shop?
Yeah, like Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve, you got it.
You're out there fighting the crowds.
23rd, 24th. There is no crowd on the 24th, I'll tell you. So 23rd, 24th, it's a great time for me. I shouldn't tell anybody because now everybody's going to do that. But
I think last year you did. You were like, there was nobody out. Amazing on Christmas Eve.
That's right. Yeah, it's great. So, so I've still got some time, right? I got another couple of weeks ahead.
Time.
So. Well, I'm excited to have another great show as we did last week. Mr. Rick Saunders is on, President and CEO of First Reliance Bank, telling a great story of growing up in the Florence area and how he got into banking. And first of all, Rick, thanks for coming back and joining us here for segment 2.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me again.
So we're going to talk about you like you're not here for a minute, if that's okay.
Sure.
Leslie, let's talk a little bit about a takeaway that you had from Rick's segment last week.
Well, I think that one of the main focuses was his philosophy about labor first and capital will follow, and talk about someone who really put their money where their mouth is. When he got his first job, he actually offered his potential employer 6 months of free labor because he was that confident in his work ethic. And I don't know that many people these days would have enough guts to say, hey, don't pay me for 6 months. And if I don't do a good job, then, no harm, no foul. I mean, who can do that? That's amazing. That was a wonderful part of the story. What have you got, Eric?
Well, I love, me, I love quotes. And Rick was talking about, for entrepreneurs out there, just, never go into it, never chase the entrepreneur role just for the money. There needs to be purpose behind it, right? And the money will come, the money will follow. But if you don't have purpose, I think we all that are in entrepreneurship know that, because it's a lot of hard work, right? It's a lot of heartache, hard work. It's tough. And if you're just doing it for the money, it's not worth it. And there's other ways in life to go make money. But if you have a passion and a belief and you're totally bought into it, the money will flow, and you'll have I love the driven purpose life, Rick Warren type stuff, right? So great stuff, Rick. Appreciate you sharing that. And as we were leaving off last week, we were talking a little bit about how you guys started the bank. But before we dive into that story, real quick, again, maybe potentially somebody listening this morning, shame on them, they didn't hear your show last week. Give them a real quick snippet of who First Reliance Bank is.
Well, thank you again for having me. I'm glad I didn't bore you so much that you wouldn't have me back a second time. I'm still in shock that you even wanted to spend an entire segment understanding what my entire childhood was like. So, look, First Reliance Bank, I can only tell you that there are a lot of banks in the world, and every one of us sell the exact same thing. I will tell you, though, that we're all not the same. So I try to make sure I always tell people and I think I said it in your last segment, that the best price and the best deal aren't always the same. And we believe that in First Reliance Bank that there's more to banking than money, that we have to bring something to the table other than getting you the best rate on a savings product or the best price on a loan. There's got to be value that we bring in terms of your life planning and your business planning and the financial goals that you want to achieve. So my brother and I and a friend of ours started this company 21 years ago. We started it with the concept that we can bring more value than just a cheap price. Although we know we have to be competitive and money matters. So we're headquartered here in Florence, South Carolina. We're $780 million asset bank, which is a top 15% bank in the country. We're shooting hard to be $1 billion plus, and not that we want to be big for the sake of being big, but being bigger is that opportunity to earn your independence. Most small banks ultimately don't survive because they make a big mistake. They ultimately don't survive because they can't scale themselves large enough to create an opportunity for the shareholders to get in and out of their investment. So you have to have an event take place to do that. So we're working hard to cross that $1 billion mark, which very few banks do, but we're there. We're close. We're only a handful of banks in the state that are up there close to $1 billion in size now. So we're located in every major market in South Carolina. We have a big presence there in Charleston, where you are. Our mortgage operation is headquartered there. We have about 50 total employees in Charleston, and almost 175 total employees across the bank. So about a third of our entire staff is right there in the Charleston market. And we're now in North Charlotte and in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So look, we sell deposits and we sell loans just like every other bank. We offer basically every product that any other bank does. So as a commodity, we bring nothing extra to the table. What we do bring to the table, though, are people with a lot of experience and a lot of autonomy and a lot of capacity, and more than anything, the passion to figure out how to help you achieve your financial goals. And I was talking with one of my bankers earlier today, and he was meeting with a client, and he said they spent an hour talking about just life. And the guy says, my banker and I have never had just a life conversation. We've only had transactional conversations. So that goes to who we are as our DNA, is that we want to get to know our customers. All our customers aren't our friends, but they're our customers, and we want to make sure that we have an emotional connection to their goals as well as a financial connection to them too. So there's a big difference, I think, in how we deliver what we deliver, but we all deliver the same thing. So I would encourage you, if you don't know your banker, get to know him. And if you don't want to get to know him, give me a call and I'll introduce you to people you probably would like to know.
If you don't want to get to know them, get to know us, right? I like that. So, I was thinking, Leslie, as he was talking back over the last six and a half years doing this show, I don't, and forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't think we've had a president and CEO of a bank on the show that I can think of.
No, I can't remember one. No, I think this is a first, Rick. You are number one.
Because there's banks on every corner, and we have not had a bank CEO on. So, Rick, if you don't mind, go back to those early days when your brother and the other gentleman, you started the bank. Talk a little bit about what that was like personally to go into a new venture, early 2000. Obviously, around the corner was the .com bubble coming. Right. Not too long after that was the 2008 crisis. What was that like for you personally to be an entrepreneur and go through some of those extreme challenges?
Well, so one, I'll just tell you, and I've discovered this pretty quickly. I never was ambitious to be the CEO of a company. And I tell people when I ask, and one of the things we try to do with all our associates here is we try to say, what are your ambitions, career ambitions, and can I help you as your employer achieve those ambitions? It's all part of engagement, I think. So nobody really ever sat down and asked me those questions, and I don't know that I ever had mapped out in my life. I was just really comfortable being a banker for people in the community, and I was pretty good at it. And when we started this process of this bank, we were at a Rotary Club and meeting, I guess, doing the promotional aspects. We hadn't put a board together at this point. We really haven't had the organization structure put together. It was really in the early stages of formation, but we began to get out in the community and to talk up the concept. And the guy who led the Rotary Club recognized us and said, would y'all like to get up and come tell your story about what you're trying to do? And my brother and our other partner looked at me and said, go tell the story. And I said, okay. So I went and told the story, and I came back and I said, y'all do know that if you're going to make me do all the public speaking, then I'm going to be the CEO of this bank, right? And they said, absolutely, you can have the job. So that's how I got the job. So it was by default more than anything. So I tell people that making widgets and running a business that make widgets are completely different skill sets. And I basically quit being a banker the minute I became the CEO of a bank. I became a businessman and not a banker. And the skill sets that it took, the transformation that I had to go through, that I still go through even today, 21 years later, was pretty significant. And the learning curve was very steep for me. Obviously, I understood the technical aspects of how a bank should work, but leading an organization was a much different deal. Trying to anticipate where the markets were heading, trying to anticipate what your customer expectations were, trying to anticipate what your competitive demands were going to be, managing margin and managing risk and managing the employee experience, the customer experience. All those things just required a completely different skill set than me sitting down with a client and mapping out a financial plan for them. So that was a aha moment for me, and it still is. I scratch my head all the time, say, how in the world did I even get through the last 21 years? Because I wasn't prepared for that. I was 38 years old. And I've got some ideas on how to get prepared for it, by the way, because I've learned a few things over the couple of years. But so anyway, we're sitting in this Rotary Club. My brother says, you should do the job. I said, okay, I'll do the job. So I have a very high fear of failure. And I tell people that fear of failure can work for you or against you. Most people, unfortunately, having a fear of failure keeps you stuck in a corner in the shadows and doesn't let you charge. For me, even as I told you in our last segment, that because I did not have a college degree, my fear of not belonging or my fear of not being good enough pushed me to study more and to read more and to be better prepared and to work harder than everybody else. The same principle applied when we were starting this company. I had such a high fear of failure that failure was never an option. So it was a 18, 20-hour-a-day gig for me for like the first 7-8 years. I mean, just constant obsession with the business and understanding the business. But more importantly, as we began to build a company, understanding how to lead a company. And that in and of itself was, I still learned that. So
in those early years, what were some of those mistakes that you made that you can maybe impart some wisdom so that we can avoid making those same mistakes? So
I will tell you, I would never start a single business without a good lawyer and a good accountant. I don't know how many people ever tell you that on your show, but the very first two people I went engaged was a good accounting firm and a good lawyer. They can save you a lot of headaches in terms of how the finances are structured and how the business legal issues are settled. Those are just two things that are just non-negotiables. And then the idea is how much capital and how much liquidity do I need to run the business? Now, banking is a much different gig than some of your other people who come on because we're regulated, and there's just minimum standards that you have to operate to both. So those are conversations that we have. We have a lot of conversations around having plenty of capital and having plenty of liquidity, but we're a cash-intensive business anyway. So while cash is king, and it is king in our business too, capital is very important as well. So you got to have the cushions to handle any kind of disruptions to your business that may come about. And banking in and of itself is you would think that we are a very low risk tolerant industry, and probably we are, but basically we're in the deposit gathering business, and then we invest those deposits, and most of what we invest those deposits in are loans. And when you're investing in lending, that is a significant amount of risk. So we can only be right 1/10 of 1% of the time. We can only be wrong 1/10 of 1% of the time. So you have to be pretty darn good. So that goes back to what's the other lesson I learned, is that you better make sure you don't put warm bodies in seats, that you better hire very talented people. And that's challenging in the early stages of a business, just because it's risky and lots of people don't want to start from ground up. Lots of people don't want to build things. They just want to come into an established, mature organization and collect a good paycheck and do what they're skilled at. And finding people who wanted to participate in the early stages of a brand new bank Where if you look at statistically, while most brand new banks don't fail until 2008 was a different story, most of them don't live very long either because they can't grow and scale themselves to a size where they can be a material player and they ultimately have to sell. And we didn't want to be one of those kind of companies, but it's hard to attract talent early on. And so we had to do a lot of the jobs ourselves, and it was pretty intense. I mean, I got to say, it's still hard to find talented people, but early on, I would say we filled a lot of seats with warm bodies and probably would have been better off just not to have put warm bodies in seats. You need the right people in the right seat doing the right job.
And so, Rick, we all go through adversity, right, and the twists and turns of entrepreneurship. And as you look back through your all's venture, obviously you mentioned 2008, which was a financial crisis, right? So it impacted the banking world severely. Here we are in the midst of COVID, another kind of obviously crisis and unique adversity that we're facing. As a leader of an organization, share with our listeners some nuggets of wisdom that how do you guys navigate and kind of keep the vision of the future during times like these?
So I would say one is I never would have growth for the sake of growth. Make sure that everything you're doing, even when you are not in a down cycle, that you are preparing a balance sheet that's strong and a P&L that's strong and a customer base that's diverse, that you put guardrails up for managing risk in an organization. So that when you have, and I'm saying guardrails, certain levels of capital, certain levels of liquidity, whatever the risk metrics are in the world that you operate in, that you have those guardrails established and you don't get outside the boundaries of those guardrails, so that when you have a cycle that comes around where your industry is disrupted, you have the wherewithal to survive the cycle. Most people kind of get caught in a jam, and they're running hard, and they're leveraging their balance sheets, and they're leveraging themselves, and then you get one down cycle, and it just wipes you out completely. And I just would say that it's easy to do when you're trying to mash the gas, but I've found that having a risk profile established and having those guardrails established and making sure you're aware and understand where you fit inside the boundary of those guardrails help you overcome significant downturns economically. Now, that being said, 2008 was very tough for our industry. We had a lot of bank failures. So I'm very happy that 12 years later, I'm still sitting here, 13 years later, I'm still sitting here talking to you about how I survived it.
What made your bank different? How come you didn't fail? What did you do?
So there's a couple of things. One is, and I think one of the things that I'm probably naturally skilled at is I'm very reasonably intuitive. And I'm saying I'm intuitive not just because I just wake up and just know it. I mean, I'm well-read. I try to make sure I stay well ahead of where the world is. I try to make sure I pay attention to body language of other business people. I try to pay attention to the regulators. I try to pay attention to what the media is saying. And in 2005 and 2006, I began to pick up that there was some uncertainty with respect to real estate valuations and what was going on. And I came into my office and said, okay, we're going to discontinue these lending products for a while. We're going to shrink our exposure in these areas. And my people really thought I had lost my mind at the time. What are you doing? We're making so much money doing it. I said, I just don't feel good about where we are as an economy. And I think there's going to be a correction coming. And I was just guessing, but I did it and I was right. So that was part of it. We began to deleverage the balance sheet early. But additionally, though, when it hit us pretty good. We had some coastal presence, and we had some pretty significant years that we had to manage and navigate our way through. I was very knowledgeable of our company. I was very knowledgeable of our industry. I understood where our pockets of risk were. And I sought a lot of outside counsel, and I'm a big believer in mentors, and we can have a lot of conversation about how mentors play a role in my life. But I will tell you, too, though, that not everybody's opinion is right. And you should be very careful about going against what your gut tells you when other people are telling you there's a different way. And I look, I was in my early 40s when that crisis hit. And it's the first time being the CEO of a bank. I'd only been the CEO for a couple of years at that point. And I got to say that there were a lot of moments I had a lot of doubt about, am I capable of leading us through this? But I knew that I was on top of where we were exposed and what the risks were, and I knew what levers to pull to manage our way through the risk. And although I was getting a lot of feedback on things that I should do to remove the risk from the balance sheet, the economics of that just made no sense to me. So I stayed with what my own experience and my own intuition told me, and migrated through that. And of course, now the model we use to manage that is nationally recognized as the model that should have been used for most companies, because most companies that did what the others were telling them to do ultimately had to sell their companies later. They survived it too, but ultimately had to sell. So the way we did it, we ultimately, we just hunkered down. We deleveraged the balance sheet. We worked our way through. It took us a couple extra years to work through the process, but we did it at a much better result for our shareholders, but also a much better result for our clients who were then struggling as well. And we didn't want to be one of those companies that turned their back on their clients during tough times, which goes back to what I was telling you earlier, is that the best price and the best deal aren't always the same. If you're a low-cost provider, typically it means that you're providing low-cost expertise, and you have centralized decision making, and you get yourself in a jam as a business that relies on a bank, you end up talking to somebody in a headquarters in another state somewhere who really is not emotionally connected to your survival. So there's value in having a banker who not only has the experience to help you, but also is engaged in that process because they live and work right beside you every day. And that's why I think the value of community banks is often underrated.
That understanding in 2008 was imperative, right? So,
right.
No doubt about it. So you've mentioned quite a few times, and we're getting sort of low on time here, but you mentioned last week several times about the value of mentorship as you were coming up through the ranks. Now you're in a position to be a mentor and give advice to others. Talk a little bit about what mentorship is and means in your life.
Well, look, so, I don't know that I ever knew I had mentors in my life. When I was younger, I told you early on when I was with the finance company that I had a boss who just invested. I mean, he treated me like a son, and he invested that much energy into me. And I don't know that I sat down then and said, wow, what a great mentor to have. But after I started the company, I was probably only 6 months into being the CEO, and I went to a quasi-mentor then and said, I am in way over my head, and I am scared to death here, and I got to have some help. And he said, well, you should go hire this guy. His name is Tommy Dowling. He's passed away. He's passed away now. He said he does a little bit of leadership coaching, and maybe he can help you. Well, Tommy was just he lived right here in Florence, and he saw something in me as well. But man, that guy, I hired him as my coach for the first 5 or 6 years, and then for the next 15, he became my mentor. So he got off my payroll, but he never quit investing in me. And he taught me about how to build an environment where employees were engaged. And I'm a big believer that companies who make decisions for quarter-end results, who are shareholder-focused businesses, and I want to say that very lightly because you got to shareholders, you got to get results. But I'm a complete opposite. I think when shareholders win first, when your quarterly decisions are based on shareholders, then your employees and customers sometimes are sacrificed. So I'm a big believer that you start from employees. You hire people and you get them engaged in the process. You get them emotionally connected to what you're doing. You create an environment where they're learning and growing and can raise their hand and have a voice. They will give you discretionary effort. And because of that, your customers win. And when customers win, your shareholders ultimately win. So we don't make decisions based on quarter results. But all that was learned from a mentor. So the whole process, this guy taught me about how to create an environment where you could attract quality talent, and you could create an environment where the quality talent wanted to give you extra effort. And that is through investing in their growth, their personal growth. And that's when I really begin to understand the value of mentorship. And we have a mentor program even in our own company, as small as it is. Everybody that comes to work here is assigned a legacy employee that's been with us from day one. And we started with 13 people. I've got about 9 of those people still left. There's 21 years later, they're still working here. And most of them were working with me in my last life. So I've had most of these people been with me for 35 or plus years. But they're all are trained mentors in our organization. That everybody that comes to work here has an assigned mentor that teaches them the culture of First Reliance Bank and how we do things and why we do the things the way we do. But I think one of the things my mentor taught me early on is you need to learn to decommoditize yourself quickly. That in a commoditized world, you only become a low-cost provider, and low-cost providers don't survive long term. It's hard to be a winner in a low-cost environment. That you need to decommoditize yourself and your business. So this is kind of why we framed up the there's more to banking than money idea, is that you're paying for some expertise here. There's value in what we do other than getting you a cheap loan and a high-yielding deposit account. So I know I'm kind of off track with the mentor thing, but I believe that you can't have enough. I've got mentors for physical, for spiritual, for business, and just life. Marriage. I even have marriage mentors. I just think you should have them for all elements of your life. And I also tell people that when you ask somebody to mentor you, don't make them do the work. You go into a mentor meeting with your own list of questions, and this is different than having a coach who should have a planned agenda. But a mentor is probably a business person, or a very busy person at least, who's offering to give you some of their time, and you need to respect that time and be prepared when you sit down and have meetings with those people.
Well, obviously the formula is working. You obviously guys have been extremely successful, and you can see, you're talking about folks have been with you 31 years, even your prior banking experience. You're doing something right. People don't hang around if you're not. And so congratulations on all that amazing success. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, Leslie. We did not get to do a lightning round. Get maybe one quick question in for Rick. People you know, stories you don't. Give him one if you don't mind.
All right. Number one thing on your bucket list.
You're going to find this kind of hokey, but I'm 60 years old. There's not many things in life that I haven't seen or done. I am at a point in my life that I want to create something of significance, and I want to transition from success to significance. I want to leave my mark on the world in a much bigger way than just being a bank CEO.
You're speaking my language. Halftime by Bob Buford, one of the greatest books I've ever read.
I got that on my list of things I just finished reading. It's great. Yes.
Rick Saunders, President and CEO, First Reliance Bank, from the PD this morning. Thank you for sharing your story, your time, and just great wisdom with us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Again, you've been listening to Beyond the Business, presented by the College of Charleston School of Business and Coastal Wealth Management. And until next Saturday morning, Low Country, have a blessed week.